Okay, good evening. Today is May 18th, 2015, about 6 p.m. This is the Elementary School Reuse and Disposition Advisory Group. Tonight's meeting is being televised and recorded. If there's any members of the audience that are also recording, please let us know.
Salute.
Call the meeting to order.
Pledge allegiance.
We'll stand up and do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Go right to the minutes. So we've already taken attendance of minutes for the May 4th meeting.
I move that we accept the minutes as drafted.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you. So,
We're to go Mrs. Weaver here.
I don't know what the... Oh, sure. I don't think it's the same thing.
Okay.
So,
Take place over now.
we start here.
Okay. Very good. There's no update on the on number 4 on our agenda, so we'll move right into our discussion number 5 of the Mary D. Stone School Site. Reaction to public comments received on May 4th, in particular related to Mary D. Stone.
Through the chair, I was just very pleased with the turnout. Last meeting a couple of weeks ago, it was very nice to get the attendance we had and the feedback from the citizens, and they're not here today, but I want to say it to them at home. We really appreciate their dedication and their service to help us make this recommendation.
And may I add, it was very nice to see that the citizens really emphasized the same type of comments that we had made throughout our process. So it felt like we were on the same page, that we were in tune to the community and they were in tune to us. It was nice.
Any other comments relative to the type of things that stood out in terms of things that highlight? It seemed like for the Mary D. site there was a particular concern of maintaining the facade and the existing front building. There was concern for the green space, not to lose the green space. There was talks of, people utilizing that space for years and years. What other type of concerns, or I'm trying to... those were the yes.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Mr. Kennedy. I believe that there was a lot of concern that they want to preserve the playgrounds,
Yep.
the fields. And I think that's going to be a great idea if possible. My only concern is with parking. If we use it for a town hall annex, parking with children in a playground might be of concern. But I certainly understand the residents. We definitely could use the playgrounds.
But just to respond...
Address the parking,
yeah,
how much additional parking would be...
Sure, through the chair. I believe the site may accommodate the town hall now. As far as the minimum requirement, it'd be up to the building inspector to make the actual determination. But right now, there's plenty of parking for town hall and its citizens. The only logjam is the students attending Mary D. And that recess area parking lot isn't even available during the day. So as that becomes available, you add an additional 30 or so spaces to the standard operation of town hall, but just spread it over 2 buildings, the ease of access. I don't see it as a major safety issue for stall count, but the building inspector could verify the legalities of it. I think that
It has to be easier than it is now.
that's for sure.
I was just concerned with those rolling balls.
Sure.
Someone's in the playground, someone comes up, you go to back up quick, and it's like, oh my goodness. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But we certainly could incorporate safety for everybody.
Yeah. Isn't there a fence out there now? I
Through the chair,
For
there's a part, yeah.
Isn't there?
Not weird.
Right.
Not
Extended.
do it more.
In years gone by, there was a backstop there for the baseball
Yes.
field
Oh, right.
when I was a
Yes,
student
yeah.
there, but
And
different.
maybe that might be all it would entail, was just, maybe just to close off in front of that parking lot, so it just keeps it separate from drivers.
But yeah, a distinct entrance for the
Yep.
kids to come in and out of, so
Sure.
they're not popping out of different
Sure.
spots.
Just through the chair, would like to read a letter we received from the Auburn Council on Aging on May 12th from the chair, Connie McBriar. The Council on Aging strongly recommended the group consider both schools that are being vacated be considered for elderly housing. Many elders have reported the lack of suitable housing, and it has become quite clear to the Council on Aging that appropriate housing for seniors in Auburn is a growing need. The letter continues, but reinforces that point that the backlog, the waiting list is high, and both facilities could help shrink that number and accommodate some of the folks who've been on that waiting list for a long time. I just wanted to share that with the group, and if the group had any thoughts or feedback to that information today.
I think we were confirmed by the neighbors that they have no problem with that kind of use, certainly for Julia Bancroft. I know Mary D is a little bit more complicated a property, but I just think that's a great idea. There's obviously a lot of land there, including the Carlson land, and at some point in time, that's got to be addressed too through the appropriate, planning board and the appropriate boards in terms of what's going to be done with that. With this big hunk of private property there, will some of that be available to buttress or to assist in land that may be needed for elder housing? I guess that falls back to the town manager and the owner of the private property.
And through the chair again, JB seems to be a great spot for that, in my opinion anyways. That the Mary D site, I believe, is more difficult given its layout, the parking, its entrances and egresses are both off of Central Street. There's a one-way onto Church Street. That doesn't work for circulation of traffic very well, so I think there's more concerns to lose your open recreational space, to have to create parking to accommodate folks that would be using that facility as assisted living. I think that becomes a lot more difficult.
I want a playground in Elder.
Certainly.
And I'm close to there,
No, and we haven't, had any, we've only had one entity approach us, and that being the Housing Authority regarding the JV site. They've not expressed any interest in developing this site over here, so that would be,
Right. It's not on the bus route. There were a couple of
there's
variables
some criteria that they had, very specific
Right.
criteria for, that the JV property met, that the Mary D property did not meet.
there. Right. So, but otherwise, through the chair, Mr. Hussey and I had a conversation or an email exchange earlier about the possibility for the town hall annex at Mary D as a preliminary use. And Mr. Hussey, if you'd like to.
Yeah, actually,
explain.
once again, from a financial concern on this, and hopefully choosing my words carefully, we know we have some ADA issues for any kind of redevelopment of all or part of Mary D. Stone, and I just wanted to make sure that Matt, and I'll say Matt's people, are aware that we probably won't need the whole building, and with that in mind, we should probably try to use those spaces initially, or phase one, that are probably least expensive to be upgraded for ADA compliance. I know there's that area where I think you said it was just a couple of steps up or down, that kind of thing, which would need to be addressed. And once again, I'm not trying to ignore the ADA issues, but if we can minimize the expense while we slowly expand into the annex, future annex, that would save the town some money, certainly, until we really find out what we need to put in there and how much that's going to cost to do it and do it correctly. Matt did remind me that the bathrooms would certainly need to be upgraded. I think I shot right back to you that that's got nothing to do with ADA. The municipal employees better be taken care of that way. I guess my last comment, and it was actually a question back to Matt, is your guesstimate on how much of that ADA compliance work can be done in-house?
I don't have an answer for that right now. I'd imagine if there were grants available and there were some matching capabilities, then the
Yeah.
town could get involved, but
Yeah.
other than that, it being strictly on our dime, having already approved the budget for next year.
Would our facilities maintenance folks have the expertise to do some of that work?
I think at the very least, they could give us a rough idea of how much it would
Okay.
cost.
Yeah. So this was more just a reminder, hey, look, if we're going to approach that building, let's try to use what I would call the least expensive space possible while still maintaining ADA compliance. Sure. Thank you.
No, that's a great point to, consider that phase approach. You've got the first floors that are already, at least one first floor, the front first floor of the old building would need some type of ramp structure to get you, actually, probably just the back first floor would be, but
Right.
to start there and see where you
Right.
needed to expand to. And
You also have the Bay Path that perhaps could help with the ADA compliance too. Especially if there wasn't a rush for it, they could probably get involved with that.
Good idea.
And I don't know if that would be in the form of a architectural plan in terms of if we did a phased approach, and I'm probably using the wrong word on that, Matt, but if we did that in 2, 3, maybe even 4 phases, I'm sure each one being more expensive than the last and eventually including an elevator. But at least... Or a gondola from down. Just the point being is I think we can leverage a lot of that square footage in there for the least amount of money possible while still, making sure we take care of our ADA issues.
Sure. I mean, it could be possible that just the first level could meet the suitable needs of the departments, but those little steps need ramps. There's going to be the need for widening of doorways for the bathrooms also, as we talked about, but I agree. There's no reason to touch the front part of the building if we're only going to use the back half. So, can't agree with that more. I agree.
Good. Thank you.
okay, we'll move over to the Julia Bancroft School discussion. Again, reaction to public comments. The JB side. Initially, a lot of similar things. Preservation of the existing school. That was a big concern of the people there. Green space again was a big concern. There was more discussion regarding traffic and quality of life issues, concerns. We heard from a couple neighbors regarding that, which is obviously a concern for both sites. But any other discussions regarding that property, or?
I think the idea of the field was a positive one for the housing authority. As far as teams playing, a little bit entertaining for people that live there, there's enough space. And I think that made everybody happy because we want to keep the fields, we want to keep the fields. So if we can coexist, it would be great.
Neighbors that spoke mentioned the neighborhood and the ball field, and they also mentioned that having housing for the elderly would be acceptable with them, that they would like to see that, so.
I for one agree with that. I think it's a good idea as well. I grew up in that area, but it's sad to see the school be taken offline, but that's a much more suitable parcel of land versus Mary D for that type of use, and its ever-growing need in town is no more obvious than it is now. And having the opportunity to offer that to not only the long list of people on the waiting list for the Auburn Housing Authority, but to meet the subsidized housing inventory 10% requirement a little bit closer. There's too many positives than negatives for me. I think it's a great idea.
Both Mary D and JB mentioned the fields, keeping the fields that we can. We've lost fields with the old junior middle school. They put a big parking lot there, and I don't know exactly what's happening with the brand new school or what fields are going to go in there. But and this morning someplace I read that the high school was going to put a lacrosse team in 2016, I think. I mean, they're, adding another team there, and I know they've already added girls hockey. I think it's a combined several towns or something like that, but, their sports program is growing. If we keep losing fields, there's going to be no place for those sports to be played.
Sure.
Well, that's true. There's an up-and-coming lacrosse, youth lacrosse program in town. They did just get JV status at the high school to start a JVs and boys and girls team, so, they'll be looking for, practice sites. They already compete with soccer and other places, but, once those fields are gone, there's no bringing them back, so.
Yeah.
Whatever development and, through the planning board and stuff, those obviously should be considerations as the town continues to grow, as to whatever projects go in to mark space that's for your future uses. You can't get those things back.
We'll had some stuff about elderly housing.
Discussion from town manager?
I believe Ms. Weigel had some input, and she was invited to this meeting.
Yes, Mrs. Weigel, would you care to address us regarding the...
Thank you for inviting me. And also, I wanted to thank this committee. You obviously work well together, and it seems like everyone does have the well-being of the town and the community and the neighborhoods and everything in mind. I like to see that. One of the things I wanted to address before I get into the National Register qualifications and things is about the parking at Mary D. I also chaired the committee that did the renovation and addition to Town Hall here. And in the course, now we're talking more than 25 years ago now. And in the course of our looking at land, I didn't notice on that first map that Mr. Benoit put up, I didn't notice if you had put that strip of land next to the Merriam Building. Was that included in the land you were talking about?
Yes.
Because that would be, I think it's an important thing, that there's a strip of land right alongside the Merriam Building next to the next house. It's wooded right now, but I'm sure it could be manicured differently. But that could give you an access, another access to the Mary D property or the Town Hall property, one or the other. So it would be good to think about. And also, it could be parking. And also, come to think of it, when we were looking at that, I remember Britton Wallace, the owner of Britton Wallace, saying, well, we'd be interested in leasing that once in a while. So anyhow, that's a point I wanted to make. I also wanted to apologize. At the last time I spoke, I said that Auburn Center was the only historic area in town, and that really was misspeaking. There are actually every neighborhood in town, including they're designated as Stoneville and West Auburn and Packagug, all of them have historic significance within that neighborhood. So I didn't mean to be spoiled about Auburn Center just because I love it so much. Anyhow, I went online, I looked through some of my, the information that I have as former chair of the Historical Commission, and there's so much available, so much information in so many areas that it covers that I think it would be best to give you the website itself. The Massachusetts Historical Commission is under the auspices of the Massachusetts Secretary of State. They do have a wonderful facility. It's over by the John F. Kennedy Library, and access to all kinds of records and all kinds of things. In order for the two buildings that we're looking at to be registered as National Register buildings, they would have to go through a process first, and I don't know why it wasn't done before, but of having an inventory form filled out. It's called Form B. It's not very complicated, and it doesn't have to have a lot of detailed information. Most of the homes in this area of Auburn Center actually already have Form D. Mrs. Johnson's house is one of them. The Town Hall is definitely on there. The Marion Building, the church, and the houses that are at least 200 years old, of which there are probably 5 or 6 of them around. They already have the Form D. So we would need that for the two buildings we're talking about in order to be eligible. Then you need to go, the next step after that is to actually apply for the National Register itself. And again, we're going to do that you would do that through the Massachusetts Secretary of State's office, Mass Historical Commission. Remember, it's not the Mass Historical Society, it's the commission. So it's a government agency versus a private group. And I would recommend, I spoke with Mrs. Jacobson about this after the last meeting, I definitely would recommend that the town, not necessarily your group, because there is a cost involved, but that the town look into hiring a consultant to do that. We've had the applications done for both the Auburn Historical Commission had applications done for the not Merriam Building, where the Society's museum is now, okay? Which, by the way, was a school building. So that has some of that school history in it, too. We had it done for that, and also she did the one that we had done for the Auburn High School, and it got all the way up to the point of it just needed to go to committee from that, but the selectmen chose not to do that. But the information is on there. It's all available with school histories. And that's the kind of thing that you need to put on that. What is the significance? You have to prove the significance of the building. The criteria are all listed on that website. But is it associated with someone important? Yes. Is it how does it fit into the history of the area? Definitely that can be done. All of these things would be done, but I would recommend that you get a consultant to do that. First step, though, get that Form B filled out, because you can't do anything without that. Then when I looked into the grants and funds that are available, and as I mentioned before, it's different whether it's going to be public or private. Privately, you see these things going all over. The old boys trade, all of those that are going in, they're being done privately. And many of the contractors, subcontractors, and everybody are getting tax credits. This is a non-taxable thing, so if we go with the municipal uses, there won't be tax credits. However, there are other kinds of grants available. And also, and I'm sure that the town departments are aware of the fact that sometimes you just have to combine grants. For example, the JB grant, you can look into ADA things and all the other facility, and get grants from that sort of thing. It can get put into the budget, the state budget, and parts can be done by the town itself. So I'm quite certain that both those buildings are eligible for listing on the National Register if you go through the process. I'm almost certain they both would be. But another thing I spoke about, and this isn't necessarily your concern, but I spoke with Julie about it, is especially in the case of Auburn Center, there is a very good chance that Auburn Center could be listed as a National Register Historic District. That doesn't mean you can't paint your house purple. It doesn't mean any of those things. But it does mean that everyone within the district is eligible for funding, and there's also there's a pride involved with that. Many of our houses are over 200 years old. So that's another thought, but that would help, because then at that point you're bringing in the town hall building and the Marion building as well. So I think the best thing to do is I can give you the website it's www.sec.ma.us/MHC. And going from that website, it will bring you all kinds of information. Too much to print out, and my printer wasn't printing well anyway. One more thing about National Register, and I want you to look at specifically at what different designations mean. We do have in Auburn, we only have, I believe, 3 National Register listings in the whole town. One of them being the museum building. And one of them is the Stone House on Stone Street, and then the library, the museum. That's it, 3. And if you look online and check out other towns and how many they have, it's a lot more. But we also have one National Historic Landmark, which is, you know, really much more significant, and that would be the launch site of the Goddard launch site. So, but that's it for what we have listed in the town of Auburn. So, I'm not sure if maybe there couldn't be something done for the Stoneville area site too, but I don't think there's as much of a collection of properties on there. By the way, even like the cemetery up here would be part of could be listed as a National Register. So I'm happy to help out wherever I can, but I do think that you ought to go quickly with the Form B and get it out there, and then talk about getting a consultant to do the rest of the project. And I'll provide you with the ones we've done in the past. Although, if you use a consultant that we use, she has everything. So I think most of what I have is on CDs too. So thank you very much. You're doing a great job. Love it. And the same about the fields. Since I was at that meeting, I've heard several people comment about how they love using the fields, how great the Julie Bancroft field is, and I haven't seen that one for years, but yeah, that's an important feature. And it's important to neighborhoods. Just, you know, when they have one place within a neighborhood that you can congregate. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I just want to echo the points that Ms. Weigel made about the open space. And I think that since the beginning of this group, we've expressed that same sentiment towards this open space. At least I've been hearing it from several members here, and it hasn't gone without consideration, that's for sure. But thank you for your fine information today. Thank you.
Okay, regarding so it's discussion regarding our group recommendations.
You mentioned your list.
Mr. Boyd, do you want yeah, we'll just go over the procedures, the letter, and
Sure. So, as a procedure, the group may want to decide how we'd like to vote. Do we want to make one recommendation for each site or multiple? It's something we can decide today, if the group's ready to do that today. The number of recommendations, and then the vote as a whole, we can either do a standard or we go roll call. So either way, kind of up to the group. Suggestions. Board of Selectmen format, that's easy too. Mr. Kennedy sent me today a list of his recommendations, and I gave a copy to the group, if everyone would like to review those and maybe provide any sort of mods or changes or anything you'd like to see amended here. But I think this is a good backbone to help the board come up with ideas or...
And that's all it was. My intentions today was just to create a framework for discussion purposes, and so we weren't trying to put it all pen to paper while we were sitting here. Thank you.
I think through the chair, if there's one thing I may add to both recommendations, is to ask our town manager, politely request that they review this Form B for the Historical Register for both. If it's going to help them receive grant funding, that's a win. Any of the funding we can receive for the rehab of these facilities on our own, if that's the group's recommendation for either, if it comes to both or just one of the buildings, I think that should be part of this as well. One person's opinion.
Oh, and when I was listening to Mrs. Weigel, just as a finer point, something I would have added, talking about the historical nature of these buildings, is if in their new capacity, those names could somehow be preserved, whether it become the Mary D. Stone Annex or the Julia Bancroft Senior Housing or something. Those names have significance in a lot of people's lives as landmarks or places where themselves or their children went to school. Again, it's a finer point when you're talking about disposition, but I think something that's means a lot to people.
Oh, I agree.
Typical. Okay. But
Mr. Kennedy? May I ask a question, please? There's a lot of reference to the Housing Authority, and I understand because of their, the way they presented and what was needed through their recommendations from the Housing Authority. I just need to make sure it's clear. If we vote that we would like to see JB become an elderly community for the residents, this does not assume that the Housing Authority takes over. Is that correct? I mean,
That is correct, and,
Okay.
and I utilize that just because they're the one that came before us. The town manager has some clarification as to how the language should be written into there, because that's not a foregone conclusion that they would be the one
okay.
moving. The town planner, do you want to just discuss that?
Sure.
They would then go for financing and
Yes.
all these things, the planning board. So I just didn't want residents to understand this is that, oh, if this goes through, Auburn Housing Authority is going to be building more apartments. Right. Right. Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Matt, do you want to just discuss the town
Sure.
manager's clarification on that?
Through the chair, in conversation through email with the town manager today, feedback to Mr. Kennedy's recommendation that we also received today. The town manager suggests that the recommendation, if the board was moving towards the Auburn Housing Authority for JB, suggests that the recommendation is worded so to recommend disposition of the property per Mass General Law, Chapter 30B for senior housing, preferably to the Auburn Housing Authority if it qualifies for an exemption under 30B. So this way, if they don't qualify for that exemption, this could still go to another entity looking to do senior housing, if that's the group's recommendation for senior housing.
I just had visions of residents going up saying, can I get off that list? Can I move it closer? If they passed it.
Mr. Chair, as I had replied to, I think I sent an email to you, I don't know if you got it earlier this afternoon on that. I know at minimum this is a framework, at maximum this, I could agree to all of this subject to the legal wordsmithing that, you know, Matt's going to get stuck with, I think, anyways. But I'm in full agreement, and I also think, as I mentioned to you, that I think that reflects what the neighbors were looking for anyways. I don't believe we can be incredibly specific on what we want, hence Auburn Housing Authority, we really can't use necessarily that language, but I'm in full agreement on this document covering at least a basis of what we want to recommend. That's what I'm looking at, so,
And through
very
the
good
chair-
document.
The chair, if we're going to bring this forward, could we just put in a date for an approximate date for when the school department will be looking to turn it over for the town? I know that at least from the school committee side, we were thinking September 1st would be a safe date, because by then there'll be occupancy, we'll have occupancy permits for September 1st. Or maybe you don't need that in us, but.
speak into the mic.
Okay. Sorry for them to hear you down there.
Yeah, I couldn't hear you,
Oh,
Dorothy.
sorry. Through the chair, might I add, or at least propose that we put in a potential date with, as for when the school department would turn this over to the town. After speaking with the school committee and some of the administration, we think that September 1st is really probably the soonest that we would feel comfortable turning it over, just because we want to make sure that we have occupancy permits for the other buildings first. So, might add, if all are in agreement, I would propose that we put in a September 1st recommendation for turnover.
You're asking for September 1st?
First. Any other, I mean, again, I intend this just as a framework. I certainly want, are there words, are there things that, ways we want to phrase this? Obviously this is always, we're just an advisory group making a recommendation to the town manager, who's going to then present this to the Board of Selectmen for ultimate, decision to be made on it. So, things are probably still going to be fine-tuned as they move forward from this point. But certainly if there's language, we've had comments, I've heard from multiple people that we've got a pretty good group here and we'll be able to sit and have adult conversations and, move things forward. But, this is an opportunity, we're being televised to, if there's things you think should be added or language we want in there in terms of field space or any other preservation issues or uses that, or secondary uses that you think, certainly this is the time to do it.
Mr. Chair, as the administrative part of this group, I'd like to request from the group a motion in the form of Mary D. School as a primary recommendation to utilize the facility as additional administrative, meeting, and training space for the town of Auburn, to preserve the historic old section of the building, preserve open space, that being the field in the back, and have the use of the building space to be determined by the town manager.
We'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
What was the second? Second?
Mrs. Stesley's.
Thank you. Again, same as before, I'd like to ask for a motion for the use at Julia Bancroft School to recommend disposition of the property per Mass General Law, Chapter 30B for senior housing, preferably to the Auburn Housing Authority if it qualifies for exemption under Chapter 30B, to preserve the historic old facade of the original building, preserve the open space for the fields. Should the Housing Authority or similar 30B senior housing development allow for the fullest extent under the law to give preference to the assignment of housing units to Auburn senior citizens and Auburn disabled veterans, and to take into consideration traffic, parking, and lighting of any proposed development so not adversely affect the neighborhoods abutting the school.
I'll make that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion. Second. What's the function of the group?
Do you want to lump in the other date and do we recover the historic recommendations of Mrs. Weigel to get that be examined, and
Absolutely.
we can do the names there if you wanted to.
Sorry.
You've been doing such a good job.
Sorry. To further add to the two motions, I would like the group to consider the amendment to add both the Form B and the historical registrar component provided to us by Ms. Weigel this evening, as well as the September 1st transfer date from the town, from the school to the town.
And do the trio names to be preserved?
If that's possible, that's a motion. We'll preserve the names of the existing schools.
School buildings to be preserved.
Incorporate them into however they're utilized.
And also to preserve the names of the buildings.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Benoit.
you.
I believe a motion.
Do we have
Make
a,
that motion.
I make a motion.
Kathy makes the motion.
we have a motion and a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Johnson. All in favor?
Aye.
For any other citizen comment?
Are there any other citizens' comments regarding tonight's group? Is that a...
Through the chair, I'd just like to say, on behalf of the town, I think this is a very great group of very knowledgeable residents, folks who care a lot about the town and share the sentiment of the folks in the neighborhood that spoke here at our last meeting. I'd just like to say how proud I am of this group, just to collectively put their thoughts together to come up with these recommendations, and I believe wholeheartedly that our town manager will help guide the town through this process and make this suitable for the communities for both buildings. I'm very pleased to see how this goes.
Well, thank you. Certainly thanks to Matt for all his assistance in the administrative support and other support that he's given me through this learning process. Certainly, again, great group of people. Been meeting together for quite a while here now, and a lot of great input from folks and people with expertise in this area regarding buildings. I've learned a lot through this process all around. But thank you to everybody here for all this support.
Thank you for chairing, Mr. Kennedy.
Second.
Just a quick note before we make a motion to adjourn. Tomorrow is election day in town. Anybody that's watching at home, hopefully they'll get out to vote. And, that's it. Any other comments from any of the group members?
Motion to dissolve the group.
We have
Second.
do we have a second to dissolve the group? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. And we just need a motion to adjourn our meeting.
I make a motion to...
We have a motion and a second.
Yep.
So adjourned. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.